My daughter's fiancé asked about Thomas's company the first time we met. I thought he was simply impressed. He asked again at Easter, then again at the 4th of July cookout, leaning against my porch railing with that easy smile, watching the river. By August, I had stopped counting, but I had started remembering. The morning of my daughter's wedding, she took my hand at the top of the staircase, her white dress catching the Georgia sunlight. She pressed something small and folded into my palm. Her eyes were steady, not frightened, not tearful, certain. I opened the note in the hallway before I followed her down. 4 words in her handwriting. Mom. I know. Go. I'd spent 11 weeks preparing for this moment. My daughter had spent 2 days reaching the same conclusion on her own. We had both been protecting each other from the same thing, and neither of us had said a word. That is the thing about mothers and daughters. We carry the same weight in separate rooms, hoping the other one won't have to feel it. My name is Ruth Calloway. I am 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a cardiac nurse at Savannah Memorial, and I retired 4 years ago, 6 months before my husband Thomas died. He was 64, a builder, a man who measured everything twice and trusted very little that he hadn't constructed himself. He built 3 things in his life that mattered: a company, a home, and our daughter Lily, in that order of effort, but never in that order of love. The house on Bluff Drive had been ours for 22 years. Wide porches, heart pine floors, windows that faced the Wilmington River. Thomas bought it for $40,000 more than we could afford and spent the next decade making it something a person might want to pass down. After he died, I stayed. Everyone assumed I would sell. I had no intention of selling anything. What most people did not know, because Thomas had been the kind of man who drove a 10-year-old truck and packed his own lunch, was that his company was worth considerably more than the house. Calloway Construction had spent 30 years building hospital additions, medical facilities, university expansions throughout the Southeast. When Thomas died, his attorney Patricia explained the full picture to me across a desk covered in folders, a portfolio, patents on a modular foundation system Thomas had developed in 2009, a company sale pending that Thomas had initiated before he passed, which eventually settled at $4.3 million. Life insurance, investments. The house, valued now at just over $1 million. Total estate value, after tax and legal fees, approximately $7.8 million. I had driven home from that meeting and made myself a cup of coffee and sat on the porch and watched the river for a long time. We had never lived like people who had money. Lily grew up thrifting on Broughton Street and thought it was fun. Thomas drove that truck until the transmission gave out, then bought the same model used. I clipped grocery coupons out of habit long after there was any reason to. Thomas used to say that money was a secret best kept. The moment people know what you have, he told me, they stop seeing you and start seeing the number. He was more right than I understood at the time. Nathan Cole came into our lives the November after Thomas passed. Lily had been living in Charleston, working as an interior designer, careful and quiet after a difficult relationship 2 years before. She called on a Wednesday evening, and I could hear the brightness in her voice before she said a single word. "Mom, I need you to meet someone. His name is Nathan. I think this might be real." He drove down with her for Thanksgiving. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of handsome that looks like it has been practiced. He shook my hand with both of his and said he was so glad to finally meet me, that Lily had told him everything about this house, about Thomas, about Savannah. He said the river view was extraordinary. He asked how long we had owned the property. I told him 22 years. He nodded slowly, looking out the window. "Incredible investment," he said. "This corridor has appreciated so much in the last decade." Lily was in the kitchen. I watched him watch the water, and I filed the moment away without knowing why. The meal was warm and easy. Nathan was charming in the way that required very little effort, which is its own kind of skill. He asked me about nursing, about the cases that had stayed with me, about retirement. He said his grandfather had been a builder and asked whether Thomas's company was still operating. I said it was in the final stages of a sale. He asked what kind of work they had done. I said mostly healthcare construction. He nodded again in that slow, considering way. After dinner, when Lily was washing dishes and Nathan and I sat with coffee on the porch, he asked his second question about the property. "Do you own the land all the way to the water? The river glittered in the dark below us." I said yes. He said Thomas had had good instincts. I agreed and changed the subject. 2 months later, they were engaged. Lily called me at 11 at night, crying the way a person cries when they are too happy to stay still. I said all the things a mother says. I meant them. I also lay awake for an hour after we hung up, thinking about the way Nathan's eyes had moved across the property that first evening. Not with admiration, with calculation. I told myself I was being paranoid. I had been alone for 2 years. I was suspicious of men by default. Lily was 31 and knew her own mind. I almost convinced myself. By spring, Nathan had been to Bluff Drive 6 times. Each visit, at least once, the conversation returned to the estate. Had I updated the property deed since Thomas passed? Did I have a financial advisor? Had I considered a living trust? He knew someone in wealth management in Atlanta. Very discreet, excellent track record. I always said Patricia handled everything, and he always nodded and smiled and said that was smart, that estate planning was so important, especially for a woman in my position. A woman in my position. I thought about that phrase for 3 days. Thomas's voice came back to me the way it always did when I needed it, low and certain. "If something feels like a warning, Ruth, it probably is." He had said that to me the year a contractor on one of his sites had been skimming materials. I had noticed the man's eyes first, the way they moved too quickly. Thomas had confirmed the rest. I called Patricia on a Tuesday morning in early April. She answered on the second ring and listened without interrupting while I described each conversation with Nathan, the questions, the timing, the careful way he inserted himself into discussions about finances. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "How long have they been engaged?" she asked. 3 months, I told her. "And how long were they together before that?" 6 months. Another pause. "Ruth, in 30 years of estate law, the people most interested in managing a widow's finances are rarely doing it out of concern." Her voice was measured, careful. "Let me look into him." Quietly. "Give me a week." I almost told her she was overreacting. Then I remembered that I had spent 31 years reading vital signs, and I had learned to trust the ones that didn't look right even when a patient was still smiling. I said, "Find out everything." Patricia called me 8 days later and asked me to come to her office. She said it was not a conversation for the telephone. I drove downtown on a Thursday morning with my hands steady on the wheel and my stomach doing something I hadn't felt since the year Thomas was sick with the thing that wasn't cancer but could have been. She had a folder on her desk. She slid it across to me before she spoke. "His name is not Nathan Cole." The words landed softly and then spread like a bruise. His real name was Aaron Pruitt. Patricia had found a legal name change filed in Georgia in 2019. He had a civil judgment against him in South Carolina from 2018, a fraud case involving a real estate investment that had never materialized. He had settled, paid a reduced amount, and disappeared from the Charleston records shortly afterward. Then she turned to the second page. Aaron's father, Kenneth Pruitt, had owned Pruitt Construction out of Columbia. Commercial builder, regional work, a solid operation for 20 years. In 2012, they had competed against Callaway Construction for the contract to build a new surgical wing at Palmetto Health in Columbia. Thomas's company had won the bid. Pruitt Construction had been stretched thin trying to compete for the contract, had taken on debt in anticipation of winning. When they lost, the company began to collapse. They defaulted on loans by 2013. By 2014, Pruitt Construction had dissolved. Kenneth Pruitt filed for personal bankruptcy in 2015. He died in February of 2016. Heart failure, the obituary said. He was 58 years old. Aaron Pruitt was 23 when his father died. The obituary listed him as a survivor. I sat in Patricia's office and held the folder and did not speak for what felt like a long time. "He doesn't want the money," I finally said. Patricia nodded slowly. "He wants to take what Thomas built." I thought of Lily. I thought of her voice on the phone that November night, how full of light it had sounded. She did not know she was being used as the door. "What do we do?" I said. "We do this right," Patricia told me. "We gather evidence that cannot be argued away. We find out whether he has done this before. We protect Lily's future and yours." She handed me a business card. Marcus Tate, private investigator, 15 years in law enforcement before going independent. She said he was thorough and discreet and had worked elder financial abuse cases with her before. I hired him the same afternoon. Marcus was a quiet man who looked like he had spent decades watching things other people missed. He came to Bluff Drive on a Saturday and moved through the rooms slowly, reading the space the way Thomas used to read a foundation before committing to a design. He installed 3 cameras, one in the kitchen behind a row of cookbooks, one in the living room inside a decorative clock Thomas had built from salvaged oak, one near the front entry tucked into a smoke detector casing. He showed me the encrypted feed on a tablet. "People show you who they are when they think they're alone," Marcus said. "We're going to let him show us." He also confirmed what Patricia had suspected. Erin Pruitt had done something similar before. Once in Greenville, a widow in her early 70s, a daughter with a serious boyfriend who turned out to be using a different name. The woman's family had paid $60,000 to make him leave quietly, terrified of the publicity. Once in Raleigh, a retired professor, same pattern, same type of questions, same practiced charm. That family had paid more. Neither had gone to the police. Aaron had never been criminally charged. He was careful. He never directly stole anything. He gathered information, built access, and then leveraged what he knew. Marcus believed the wedding was his intended endpoint. Once married, he would have proximity. Proximity could become control. Control could become paperwork signed in vulnerable moments, financial decisions made with a trusted family member present, assets moved by degrees into positions he could access. But first, Marcus said, he needs to make you seem unreliable. I didn't understand what he meant until Dr. Sandra Webb called me. Sandra had been a colleague at Savannah Memorial for 15 years, a geriatric specialist, one of the few people who had known Thomas well. She called on a Wednesday evening and said she needed to tell me something she had been sitting with for 2 weeks and could no longer keep to herself. "Aaron came to see me," she said. "He called himself Nathan Cole and said he was your daughter's fiancé. He said he was concerned about you." My coffee cup stopped halfway to the table. He had told Sandra that I had been having memory lapses, forgetting where I put things, repeating conversations, getting confused about dates. He asked what the early signs of cognitive decline looked like in a former nurse who might try to conceal them. He asked about medications that affected mental clarity. He asked about the legal process for establishing a medical power of attorney for a parent who might not agree. Sandra's voice was very careful as she listed each question. "Ruth," she said, "I've known you for 20 years. There is nothing wrong with your memory." The questions he was asking were not the questions of someone worried about a family member. They were research questions. I thought of every cup of coffee Nathan had poured for me, every glass of water he had carried from the kitchen when I'd asked for nothing, the way he always offered, the way he always insisted it was no trouble. He asked about sedatives, Sandra said quietly. Specifically, what dosage of a common sleep medication would cause significant confusion in a woman my age, what the side effects looked like, how long it stayed in the system. I looked at the glass of water sitting on the kitchen counter, the one I had poured an hour ago and hadn't touched yet. I poured it down the sink. I called Marcus that night and we met the following morning. Patricia joined us. We agreed on a plan. Nathan needed to be caught doing something specific, something documented, something that could not be explained away as a misunderstanding or a paranoid old woman's suspicion. Patricia said she had reached out to the families in Greenville and Raleigh through their attorneys. Both were willing to submit sworn statements now that someone else had found him. That gave us pattern evidence. Criminal pattern, not just behavior. The sheriff's office had been notified through Patricia's contact, a detective named Howard Banks who specialized in financial crimes against the elderly. He would be available but would wait for our signal. We set the trap for the Saturday before the wedding. I called Nathan and told him I needed to talk through a few things about the estate before Lily and I got caught up in the final week of preparations. Something about the property deed that Patricia had flagged, a signature required on a document. Could he come by Saturday evening? Just the two of us, informal, easier without lawyers present. He agreed too quickly. He said, "Of course." anything he could do to help. I made shrimp and grits because it was Thomas's recipe and my hands knew it without thinking, which meant my mind could stay focused on everything else. Nathan arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine he had clearly selected to impress. He was warm, attentive, exactly the man Lily had described in every phone call since November. We ate. He guided the conversation toward finances 3 times. I redirected each time gently, saying Patricia handled the specifics, that I was more comfortable with her present for anything official. He smiled and said, of course, no pressure, he just wanted to make sure I was protected. That word again. Protected. At 7:30, I pressed my fingers to my temple and said I had a headache coming on, probably the weather. I excused myself to get aspirin from the upstairs bathroom and left a glass of water on the counter near where he sat. I climbed the stairs, opened the tablet Marcus had left with me, and watched. Nathan sat still for 4 seconds after my footsteps faded. Then he stood, walked to the base of the stairs and listened, returned to the kitchen. He glanced toward the hallway, reached into his jacket, and removed a small white prescription bottle. He shook one tablet onto the counter, took a spoon from the drawer at the back, not the one I had used, a clean one from the rear of the tray. He crushed the tablet methodically, collected the powder, tipped it into the water glass, stirred it, wiped the spoon on a paper towel and placed it in the sink, returned the bottle to his pocket and walked back to the table. 52 seconds. I sat at the top of the stairs and breathed carefully and thought about Thomas. Then I walked down. Feeling better? Nathan asked, half rising from his chair. A little, I said. I just need some water. He was already moving to the counter. Here, he said, picking up the glass and bringing it to me. Drink this. His eyes watched my face with an expression arranged to look like tenderness. My phone rang. The call Marcus had programmed to come at exactly that moment. I turned away, lifted the phone to my ear, and in the same motion wrapped the water glass in a dish towel from the counter, preserving what was on the surface, and set it carefully in the sink. By the time I turned back to him, the glass was empty. He looked at it. For just a moment, something behind his eyes went very still. The warmth dropped out. Then it came back, and he said he should probably head out, let me rest before the big week. I walked him to the door and stood on the porch until his taillights disappeared past the oak trees. Then I sat down on the porch steps and put my face in my hands. Marcus was there in 4 minutes. He collected the glass, the spoon, the paper towel with gloved hands and labeled evidence bags. He showed me the footage on his phone. Every motion, every second, audio clear. We have him, he said. Sandra called with the lab results the next morning. Zolpidem, 20 milligrams, double the standard dose. In a woman your age, Ruth, she said carefully, that amount could cause a fall. A serious one. If you had been alone, I looked out at the river. Thomas had chosen this house for that view. He had said the water made him feel like things lasted. Now we finish it, I said. We met at Patricia's office on Monday. Patricia, Marcus, Sandra, Detective Banks. We reviewed the footage, we reviewed the lab results, we reviewed the statements from Greenville and Raleigh. Banks said we had enough for an arrest immediately. I said I wanted to wait for the wedding. They looked at me. If we arrest him now, I said, Lily will always carry a question. She loved him. Part of her will always wonder if he was real, if we were wrong, if she missed something that only we saw. But if it happens in front of people, with evidence she can see herself, she will know, and he will not be able to disappear the way he has twice before. He will not be able to tell her a story. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the families in Greenville and Raleigh deserve that too. To see him held accountable in public, not paid off in private. We set the plan. Detective Banks would attend as a guest. Marcus would be on the property perimeter. Patricia would bring the documentation. Sandra would be present with the lab report. The 2 women from Greenville and Raleigh had sent video statements, willing to testify. The week before the wedding, I moved through each day like someone walking across ice. Nathan came by twice more, both times with gifts for Lily, both times watching me with that careful attention that I now understood completely. I smiled and made coffee and asked about the seating chart. Lily noticed I was quieter than usual. Mom, are you okay? she asked on Thursday evening, the two of us folding cloth napkins for the reception tables. Just tired, I said. Happy tired. She looked at me for a moment longer than necessary. Then she nodded and picked up another napkin. I did not know what she knew. I could not have guessed. The morning of the wedding came soft and gold, the way September mornings in Savannah do when the heat finally relents. I helped Lily into her dress in her childhood bedroom, the one with the window seat where she had read every summer until she was 16. She was 31 years old and looked exactly like the child I had carried and exactly like a woman I did not yet fully know, which is what daughters become when you are not watching closely enough. She let me fasten the buttons at the back. We stood together in the mirror. Then she turned around and took my hand. She was calm, completely calm. Her eyes were clear. I need you to listen to me, she said. And I need you to not fall apart, because I need you to be sharp right now. She told me about Tuesday night. She had driven to Nathan's hotel to leave a card in his car, something she had been making for a week, a letter about the life they were going to build. She had seen his car in the lot. She had heard voices from the open window of his room. Nathan and his friend from college he had introduced as a groomsman, a man named Joel who Lily had always found slightly wrong in a way she could not name. She had stood outside the window for 11 minutes. She heard everything. The plan to have me declared incompetent. The research Nathan had done on power of attorney proceedings in Georgia. Joel encouraging him, saying once the paperwork was in place it would be simple, that Lily would be too shocked to move quickly enough. Nathan saying he had waited 4 years for this and he was not going to rush the last mile. Joel saying something about Thomas Calloway and what he had cost their family, and Nathan laughing, a sound Lily said she had never heard from him before, flat and cold and completely unfamiliar. She had driven home and not slept. She had spent 2 days deciding what to do. I didn't want to come to you without knowing for certain, she said. I was afraid you would try to protect me from it. I was afraid of the same thing, I said. We looked at each other. You already knew, she said. It was not a question. I've known for 11 weeks, I said. I have video, lab results, a private investigator, an attorney, a doctor, and a detective. All here today. She let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere very deep. So we're doing this, she said. We're doing this, I said. She reached into the hidden pocket in the skirt of her dress and handed me the folded note she had written that morning. I wrote it in case I lost my nerve in the moment, she said. I read it and folded it and put it in my own pocket. We walked down together. The house was full of flowers, Thomas's garden cut and arranged by the woman he had hired every summer to keep the roses in order. 63 guests sat in white chairs on the lawn facing the river. Nathan stood at the makeshift altar under the wisteria arbor. Thomas had built the summer before he got sick, looking like everything a person would want at the end of an aisle. Patricia sat in the 4th row with a leather portfolio on her lap. Sandra was near the front, her bag tucked beneath her chair. Detective Banks stood at the edge of the lawn in a light jacket. Marcus was somewhere in the tree line. Invisible. Lily took my arm and we walked forward together. The ceremony began the way ceremonies do, with music and murmuring and the particular silence that falls when something that feels permanent is about to be said. The officiant moved through the words. Nathan watched Lily with an expression that looked, even now, like love. I thought about how long he had practiced that expression and how many rooms he had walked into and how many women had believed it. If anyone present knows of any reason why these two should not be married, speak now or forever hold your peace. I stood up. The lawn went silent in a way that felt physical. I need to stop this ceremony, I said. My voice was steady. 31 years in cardiac emergency had given me that. Nathan's smile held for 2 more seconds. Then his eyes moved to my face, and he saw something there that made the smile dissolve. Carolyn, he started, using Lily's name for me, the one he had adopted as familiarity. His name is not Nathan Cole, I said. I spoke to the guests, not to him. His name is Aaron Pruitt. He has a civil fraud judgment in South Carolina and 2 prior cases in which he targeted widows in their 60s and 70s. He visited my physician 5 weeks ago and asked how to have an elderly woman declared mentally incompetent. 4 nights ago, he put 20 milligrams of a sedative into a glass of water he then handed to me with a smile. The murmuring broke open into something louder. "That is not true," Nathan said. His voice had changed. The warmth was entirely gone. "This woman has been suspicious of me since the day we met. Lily, sweetheart, she has never—" "I was outside your hotel window on Tuesday," Lily said. She was not loud. She did not need to be. Every person on that lawn leaned forward. "I heard you and Joel planning everything. I heard you say my father's name. I heard you laugh." Nathan stared at her. The thing beneath his face, the thing that was Aaron Pruitt, looked at her with something that was not love and had never been love, and 63 people saw it happen. Sandra stood and introduced herself and described in clinical terms what 20 milligrams of zolpidem does to a woman of 68, and what Nathan had asked her in her office, and why she had called me. Patricia stood and opened the portfolio and described the documentation, the footage, the lab report, the statements from Greenville and Raleigh, the civil judgment, the legal name change. She held up the flash drives and the printed reports and she said, "This is not a family misunderstanding. This is a documented pattern of fraud and attempted elder abuse." Detective Banks walked across the lawn and told Nathan he was under arrest. He gave him the full recitation. Nathan said nothing. The Joel, who had been standing at the side as a groomsman, tried to move toward the gate in the garden wall, and a second officer was already there. They were both gone within 4 minutes. For a moment, the lawn was very still. Then one of Lily's friends from college stood up and started to cry, and that broke everything open, and people were moving and talking and coming toward us. Lily turned to me. I pulled her close and held her in her wedding dress in the middle of her wedding that would not happen, and I felt her shake once, deeply, and then go still. "I'm so sorry," she said against my shoulder. "You have absolutely nothing to be sorry for," I said. "I should have come to you Tuesday night." "You came to me this morning," I said. That's when it mattered. We sat on the porch steps long after the guests had gone, the two of us still in our good clothes, watching the river turn dark as the sun dropped behind the live oaks. Lily held a glass of sweet tea in both hands, the way she had held her sippy cup as a child, with complete seriousness, as if the drinking were the point. She asked me how I had first known. I told her about Thanksgiving, the way his eyes had moved toward the water, the specific phrasing, "incredible investment," the way curiosity and calculation feel different when you have spent 3 decades watching people. She was quiet for a while. "Do you think he ever felt anything real?" she asked. I thought about it honestly. "I think his father's death was real," I said. "I think the grief was real. I think what he did with it was a choice he made, and he made it for a long time, which means he had a long time to make a different one." She nodded. "Dad would have seen it at Thanksgiving," she said. "Probably at the door," I said. She laughed, which surprised us both. 4 months later, in the January cold, Lily drove down from Charleston for the weekend, and we sat in the kitchen eating the biscuits Thomas had taught me to make the first winter we were married. Aaron Pruitt had pled guilty to fraud and conspiracy charges. Joel, whose last name turned out to be Rains, and who was Aaron's cousin, had pled separately. The families from Greenville and Raleigh had both given testimony. The judge had called the pattern of conduct predatory and deliberate, and had sentenced accordingly. Lily was back in Charleston, back in her studio, taking on new clients. She had started running again in the mornings along the Battery Wall. She was not ready to think about meeting anyone. She said she was not sure when she would be and that she was trying to make peace with not knowing. I told her that was the only honest way to do it. After lunch, she walked through the garden with me. Thomas had planted it the year Lily was born, and 31 years later it had the look of something that had always been there. She stopped at the stone bench I had added in October, the one with Thomas's name on it and the line beneath. "He built things that lasted." She ran her fingers across the letters. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me, "about money. That it's not about what you show, it's about what you can protect." "That was your father's idea," I said. "I just inherited it." "I want to understand it better," she said. "The trusts, the estate, all of it. I think it's time." I had been waiting for her to ask. Thomas had believed in letting Lily build her own life before she understood the size of the safety net beneath it. I had honored that. But she was 31 and had survived something that would have broken many people, and she had done it with her eyes open and her voice steady. I told her everything. She listened the way she had always listened, carefully and without interrupting. The house, the company sale, the patents, the investments, the full number. The trusts Thomas had established. The ways Patricia had structured everything so that no marriage, no legal maneuver, no document signed in a confused moment could reach it without her explicit and reviewed consent. He never knew, she said slowly. Aaron. He thought he knew what we had, but he didn't. He saw an old woman and a nice house and a dead man's company, I said. He saw what your father spent his whole life making sure people would see. Lily looked at the bench for a long moment. He protected us even after he was gone, she said. He was a builder, I said. He built things meant to hold. We walked back inside as the January light went silver over the river. The house smelled like biscuits and coffee, and the particular warmth of a place that has been loved in steadily over a long time. Thomas's tools were still in the garage. His truck, the second one, was still in the drive. I had not moved his coffee mug from the windowsill where he had last left it. Some things you keep not because you cannot let go, but because they are worth keeping. That night, after Lily had gone to bed in her old room, I sat in the kitchen and wrote a note to myself on the small pad Thomas had kept by the phone for 30 years. I wrote down what I wanted to remember. Trust the instinct first. Gather the proof after. You already know what the numbers tell you. The hard part was never knowing. The hard part was believing that what you knew was worth acting on. She is worth acting on. He built this. We kept it. I folded the note and put it in my pocket, right beside the one Lily had pressed into my hand on the stairs that morning. Mom, I know. Go. We had both known. We had both moved. And the thing Aaron Pruitt had spent years trying to reach was exactly where Thomas had always intended it to be. Safe and ours. And built to last. If you are watching this and something in it sounds familiar, if you have someone in your life asking questions that feel like measurements, please do not wait the way I almost waited. Your instincts are not paranoia. They are information. And the people you love are worth the discomfort of acting on them before you have proof enough to satisfy your doubt. We have that right. All of us do. Thank you for being here. If this story stayed with you, please share it and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.